During Japanese colonial rule, Hangul spread. Japan educated Korea and literacy increased. You may have seen claims like this online or in videos. At the same time, others argue the opposite. That Japan suppressed the Korean language. And that this story is entirely false. So which is it? Today, we will step away from emotional arguments and simple good versus evil narratives, and instead examine this question through numbers, definitions, and institutions. First, we need to clarify an essential point. Before annexation, Korea did not conduct a modern, nationwide literacy survey. This means that any statement like literacy before annexation was X% is always an estimate, not a measured fact. Moreover, the word literacy itself has more than one meaning. One refers to elite literacy, the ability to read and write classical Chinese. The other refers to practical or popular literacy, the ability to read and write Hangul in everyday life. If these two are not clearly distinguished, the entire discussion collapses. You may often encounter the claim that Korea's literacy rate before annexation was only 2 or 3%. This figure comes from defining literacy only as the ability to read classical Chinese. In other words, it refers to aristocratic officials, clerks, and those capable of handling government documents or civil service examinations. Seen this way, a figure of around 3% is not necessarily wrong. However, to present this number as the literacy rate of Koreans is a fundamental conceptual substitution. It excludes the majority of the population, who used a different written system. Hangul was created in the 15th century under King Sejong. It is true that for centuries, official documents and state administration relied on classical Chinese, but this does not mean that Hangul was unknown or unused. By the 19th century, Hangul was already used widely in personal letters, religious texts, popular literature, and everyday reading and writing, especially among women and commoners. Pre-annexation Korea, therefore, was not a non-literate society. It was a society with a dual literacy structure: classical Chinese for elites and the state, Hangul for daily life among the broader population. So what changed during Japanese colonial rule? Japan introduced a modern school system. Textbooks were standardized, elementary education expanded, and literacy became something taught systematically in schools. At first glance, this may appear to support the claim that Hangul spread because of Japanese rule. However, the language policy behind this system is crucial. Over time, Japanese became the central language of instruction. In the early period, Korean language education did exist. But from the late 1930s onward, Japanese was promoted as the national language, and Korean was increasingly marginalized. In short, the education system expanded, but it was not designed to maximize Korean language mass literacy. Understanding this distinction is essential. Let us return to the core question. Did Hangul spread because of Japanese rule? The most accurate answer is both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that modern schooling, textbook production, and print infrastructure contributed to the standardization and formalization of written language, including Hangul. But no, in the sense that these policies were not aimed at empowering Korean language literacy, and Japanese language education increasingly took precedence. Therefore, the narrative that Japan benevolently spread Hangul oversimplifies reality and obscures the actual goals of colonial education. So when did Hangul truly spread across the entire population? The answer is clear.
After liberation.
In both North and South Korea, compulsory education expanded rapidly, adult literacy campaigns were launched, and education was conducted in a unified national language. As a result, literacy rates rose dramatically in a very short period. Statistically and institutionally, this transformation aligns far more closely with post-liberation nation building than with colonial-era policies. To summarize, 3% literacy refers only to classical Chinese elite literacy. Hangul already functioned as a popular written language before annexation. Under Japanese rule, education expanded, but Korean language mass literacy was not its primary objective. The decisive expansion of Hangul literacy occurred after liberation. For these reasons, the history of Hangul cannot be reduced to the claim that it spread, thanks to Japan. History is rarely that simple.